Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku can steal villain's power and got Harem, part 3, the last part. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Mr. Chubby Snorlax 619, link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel and like this video. So let's begin the video. A month later. Izuku was currently sleeping in a bed. He wasn't in his normal room. Heck, he wasn't even in his apartment. He was somewhere else. Right now he was tossing and turning under his blanket, as if he were having a bad dream. He looked frightened as he kept tossing and turning. The memories of these past few months. How he hunted and hurt the most deranged and immortal people he's ever encountered. Killers, thieves, arsonists, psychos, and rapists. He's seen the worst of humanity these past months. He stopped muggings, stealing, killings, and even a rape. It was horrible to see people use their gifts to commit such evil and disgusting acts. Why were such people given quirks like those? They didn't deserve them. That's why he took them. When he left them with their broken minds and bodies, it felt right. Yet in the end it felt like it didn't matter. He only saved those people because they were in the way of his meal. His meal? What the hell was happening to him? Suddenly Izuku gasped for air and quickly sat up in a cold sweat. He looked around the room anxious. Like he was being watched or getting ready to get attacked. After a couple of minutes calming down, he sighed. Man, it's like they're getting worse. Izuku told himself with a sigh. He pulled off his blanket and got out of bed. He walked over to his window. It's not even 6 o'clock yet. It's been a month since he got caught and arrested. A whole month. He should be in a cell in some prison for villains and psychos. But no, here he was in one of All Might's personal estates. Which was basically a mansion. Izuku had been living here with his mom along with All Might on occasion. Which was still kind of freaky and awesome. He was living with his hero. Of course there were many downsides. When he agreed to live and train under All Might, he thought it was going to be a dream come true. It wasn't. He and his mom were forced alive here. With a pro hero or two along with heavy security outside the grounds to watch him. Currently there was no hero here because of All Might. But when he would leave for business or for an emergency, they would send another pro to watch him. It wasn't great. As if things weren't bad enough. Doctors and scientists would come by to test him and monitor his quirks. One of the many measures put in place because of him. He was special apparently. His quirk was very rare and the scientific world wanted to learn more about him. While most of the pros, police, and government wanted to know his limits and strengths. In case he went crazy. A rather cold but needed measure. It also sucked because he couldn't use any of his quirks without proper supervision. The only time he got to use them is when he and All Might train or when the doctors and scientists were here. Our hero sighed again as he took a look down at his ankle. Where he saw an ankle monitor. That monitored his every move and told his exact location. It even told them if he was using his quirks. If he even took a step outside the mansion legal grounds. The pro heroes and cops would be on him in minutes. So basically he was a prisoner. He couldn't go out anywhere. Not to school or the beach or parks. He still had to finish his schooling if he wanted to attend UA though. That's why he had a private tutor who's been teaching him. Personally picked by All Might. She would usually come around early in the afternoon to teach him. She was nice enough and didn't really fear him. A bit uneasy at times, but nothing major. While not ideal, it wasn't as if he could go out if wanted to. He was outed for being the Stalker. The big bad boogeyman that frightened thugs and other scum alike. People feared him, some hated or even loved him. Either way, he didn't want any of it. He ruined so many lives. His mom's more than anyone's. Because of him she couldn't go out shopping, visit friends or see the world anymore. All because of him. People knew his identity. Which meant they knew who his family was. Because of what he's done, he made his mom a target. He hurt and scared a lot of people. People who would want to even the score. What am I doing here? Izuku asked himself with a depressed frown. He looked at his room. It wasn't really his. It was one of many rooms in this big mansion. His mom was sleeping right next to him. All Might of course was sleeping in the master bedroom. Somewhere upstairs. This room was big, bigger than his old room. Yet it felt so small. Sure, he had his stuff and belongings with him. All his All Might stuff and even his hero notebooks. His hero notebooks were very important. He wrote not just because he loved heroes or was interested in quirks in general. It helped him relax. Analyzing quirks and his own help a lot. He didn't need to write such information because of his quirk. Izuku didn't like to admit it. But he was technically a genius. Give him a week's worth of college advanced books and he'll finish them in a day or two. He was also a fairly good strategist. When he was the Stalker, he was able to defeat tougher opponents using his wits while being untrained with the quirks he took. While avoiding the police and heroes at the time. Too bad he wasn't as fortunate when Eraserhead found him. Things pretty much went downhill from there. I'm too awake to fall asleep again. Izuku muttered out as he rubbed his eyes. He then noticed another one of his notebooks laying on top of his desk. It was his new personal notebook that had all the new info he got on his quirks. Guess I can go over some things until everyone wakes up. With a small yawn, Izuku walked over to his desk. When he made it there, he took a seat and turned the lamp on. He looked down at the notebook, which didn't have a title like his others. For one, he didn't plan for it. Second, he wasn't proud of it. He's done a lot of terrible things to get such quirks. It also told of the people he took them from. He didn't know much about most of them. But a side effect of stealing someone's quirk is that he got a bit of that person's memories. To say the least, what he saw most of the time was unpleasant. So he wrote down what he saw and how he thought about such individuals. He also updates the findings on their quirks. Well, his quirks now, if you're being specific. Since the doctors and scientists have been testing him, he's found a lot more about his quirks. His first quirk too. Along with their limits, side effects, and strengths, etc. Izuku opened the notebook and started to read. Starting with his first quirk. Evolved Intuitive Aptitude Quirk. Type: Mutant. Even when he was a little kid, Izuku knew he was special. Long before his quirk manifested. Turns out being in a life or death situation awakened it. He awakened it when he was getting mugged after walking home. Anyways, the way he's able to analyze people, especially quirks, was fascinating. At least that's what the scientists told him. Frightening was one they whispered at one point. Not surprising. His quirk allowed him to analyze things at a whole other level than normal people. He was able to absorb information at unbelievable speeds and remember them anytime he wanted. He could also fix anything in a matter of minutes or even figure out problems at a high level. Reading and figuring out people was just as easy. When he first met Eraserhead and All Might when he wasn't in his muscle form, he deduced their true identities and quirks in an instant. Well, not All Might's quirk for some reason. He would have to look into that later. It all sounded wonderful, didn't it? Being a genius and a walking library. Izuku would have been content with that. Sure, it wouldn't be flashy, but he still could have been a hero if he worked hard enough. Unfortunately, his quirk was more than that. He had the ability to copy quirks. Or steal them. He really didn't figure out which was which. After getting a quirk, the person he got it from would go into an unresponsive vegetable state. So whether he copied them or stole them was up for debate. From what he gathered and has been told, his type of quirk was extremely rare. A mutant quirk at that. Which meant it was always active. There have only been 2 cases where a person can forcefully steal a quirk. At least from what he's looked up. Him and the quirk serial killer Siller. His father. Shocking? No, it wasn't hard to figure out. It made sense. From the rumors and limited reports online, it was the only possibility. Though it was strange how his quirk didn't work the same as his. From what he's heard, Sillers took quirks by cutting up their skulls and analyzing their brains. Killing them in the process. Izuku thanked God his quirk wasn't like that. What he did wasn't ethical or legally right. But killing, that's a line he hoped he would never cross. Though given what his quirk's only side effect compelled him to do, it was hard to tell. The hunger, as he liked to call it. His quirk had the need to seek out more knowledge. Books only helped little by little. Guess that's why he's been such a bookworm as of late. No, after he accidentally took someone's quirk, he knew what he needed to do. He craved for quirks. The idea of doing what he did to the one who tried to mug him scared the hell out of him. Not only because it sickened him, but because when he did it, it felt good. Like a rush. At that moment he never felt more alive. That's what scared him. He never told All Might, the doctors or the scientists this. Not even his mom. How could he? That's not all that scared him. Whenever his hunger feels unsatisfied, he can't control himself. At one point he almost attacked his mom when she was sleeping. His own mother. That's why he did what he did as the Stalker. To protect those close to him. Even Kakin and his classmates. In the end, all he did was make things worse. Blaming everything on fate or even his parents would seem easier. But he wasn't like that. Sure, it was mostly his dad's fault in the first place. He inherited his quirk from him. Yet he's never met the man. Well, he felt a bit of anger and abandonment from him for leaving him and his mom. It was in the past. What matters is right now. Recently he's been meeting and working with Dr. Chiyoshu Zenji, a recovery girl. All Might brought her to meet him to help him. From understanding his quirks to hunger. Something she's been studying a lot of since they met. This past week he's been on a few treatments to repress his hunger. And so far nothing bad has happened. At least nothing like usual. The treatments were mostly therapy with recovery girl or a psychiatrist. Or taking medicine used for schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. It's been a month and the hunger hasn't returned. Usually it'd be a few weeks when it comes around. That's why every couple of weeks he hunted. So far nothing yet. He hoped it was the treatments working, but he had doubts. Especially after a few incidents this past month. Evolved intuitive aptitude, from what he's gathered all, but one of the limitations his father had didn't affect him. Like information overload or forgetting said information. But the obsession to know more has affected him. Maybe even worse. Since working with professionals he's on the path to learn more about his quirk. Even learning to repress his hunger. More time needed to know more. Pacify quirk. Type. Emitter. Izuku remembered how he got this quirk very vividly. A mugger by the name of Yuzuka Ichioro ambushed him in an alley when he was walking back home. He found himself in the air as Yuzuka had a knife out, threatening to kill him if he didn't comply. Normally Izuku would have done so without question, shaking in fear that whole time too. But that didn't happen. His body acted on its own and he struggled. Eventually Izuku had to let him go. At the time Izuku was suffering from heroin withdrawal. So he wasn't as strong as he should have been. That's why I was mugging Izuku in the first place. To get some money for his addiction. After being freed Izuku tried to run at first, but he was stopped by Yuzuka, who almost stabbed him with a knife. Somehow in the scuffle Izuku overpowered Yuzuka and did what felt natural. He grabbed Yuzuka's head and proceeded to use his quirk on him. Which at the time Izuku was unaware of. When he was done, Yuzuka fell to the ground, unresponsive. Horrified and shocked by what happened Izuku quickly ran home like his life depended on it. Leaving Yuzuka in the alley. Eventually Izuku found out how his quirk worked. Then found out he had Yuzuka's quirk. Which was shocking to say the least. The ability to levitate objects, people among other things, and pacify quirks. A powerful quirk to have. So why was Yuzuka mugging people to feed an addiction? Well, when Izuku searched through parts of memory he took from Yuzuka. He got his answer. His whole life Izuku was abused by his parents. Sexually abused by his father at times. Growing up he was abused and told he would never achieve anything. Which didn't help his education so he was forced to drop out. Eventually he ran away from home and lived on the streets his whole life. Drifting from town to town stealing or mugging. He would catch his drug habit later in life. From what Izuku saw, Yuzuka has never really killed anyone. Maybe hurt them, but never killed any of them. He was just a guy down on his luck. It was kind of sad really. No one helped this poor man when he was a defenseless child. No heroes, police or teachers at the school he went to. Maybe if they did his fate would be different. He'd probably be a hero or successful person in life. Now, he was a vegetable with no hope of recovery. Izuku couldn't take back what he did. So he promised himself that he would use Yuzuka's quirk to do good. Just like he should have. Well, that was the original plan. Before his hunger. Pacification, the ability to levitate objects, people, etc. with their mind. Also has the ability to nullify quirks of people when holding them. Very similar to Eraserhead's quirk. Limitations are that this quirk could only handle so much. If not careful one will suffer a bloody nose along with headaches, body aches, and pains. If using past safe limitations Izuku would most likely pass out and suffer long-term effects. Originally Izuku could only lift a ton, maybe half. Lifting multiple things or people was hard but doable. He did lift bits of a collapsing building for a good couple of minutes. Pacifying quirks weren't hard. His limit was probably at 3 or 4 people. Since training and help from All Might, scientists, and doctors. His original limitations have changed. He could now lift a whole ton with no problems. His focus was getting better too. Pacifying quirks was getting a bit easier too. Now he could hold and pacify a dozen people if needed. Given time, All Might told him his quirk would only get stronger. With proper time and training of course. Only concerns were the headaches and bloody noses. Which only happened when he overused his quirk. Currently he could only activate this quirk twice or 3 times a day. So those limitations remained. More time needed to know more. Toxic Haze quirk. Type. Emitter. Originally named Haze breathing and exhaling quirk. Izuku thought it would be best for a name change. The original user, a rapist by the name of Ichio Itsuka, wasn't much of a thinker. In fact he was a disgusting idiot who stalked young high school girls. When he took his quirk Izuku didn't get much like most. Though he did get glimpses. What he saw was horrible. Ichio was a serial rapist who targeted young women. Even little girls. 7 times he was almost caught. But it wasn't. All because of his quirk. Izuku was a peaceful and timid person by nature. Who would wish harm on most. But Ichigo when he took his quirk and watched his eyes become unresponsive. It felt great. Ichio was an animal who needed to be put down. Even Izuku thought that. Yet he still held on to his promise. No killing, even though that animal deserved it. It kind of sickened him when he had to use his quirk. The idea of using a quirk that has done so much harm appalled him. Yet he used it when needed. Izuku found Ichio a week before his identity was compromised. Ichio was going to rape a young girl in the smoke-dark alleyway at night. Izuku luckily found him before he could do the act. Ichio used his quirk to knock out the girl. When he saw his chance, Izuku attacked and overpowered him with his pacify. What happened next wasn't nice, but felt good. After getting toxic haze, Izuku called the cops on the girl's phone and made sure she was safe when the cops would come. He quickly vanished after that. From what Izuku learned, toxic haze was a curious quirk. The ability to exhale a toxic gas wasn't something new. But this one was special. When breathed in by anyone, the haze would instantly knock someone out. Another thing was that this quirk allowed him to breath most toxic gases. Even smoke. It also worked well as a smokescreen when needed. The scientists used things from tear gas to chlorine on him. And he really remained unfazed. Toxic haze, the ability to exhale and breath toxic gas. Even smoke. While not fatal when breathed in, the haze would render anyone unconscious. Izuku could use this quirk actively when needed. All he needs is to have enough air in his lungs. Limitations were that if out of breath he would exhale nothing. Though I would still be able to breath toxic gases no problem. Also, after recent use, Izuku found out his breath would be horrible for a few hours. Note to self. Have tick, gum, maybe even toothpaste and toothbrush on hand. Really not knowing a proper way to train with this quirk, Izuku and All Might thought to leave it be. For now. More time needed to know more. High Vault Quirk. Type. Transformation. Originally named Enhanced Jumping Quirk, which sounded a bit bland. All Might told him that he should rename some of his quirks. After all, they were his now. For better or worse. Izuku planned for days, even weeks, to catch the original user of this quirk. Her name was Selena Hopper. A foreigner from the United States who thought it would be easier to commit her crimes here. Too bad she was wrong. But by God was she persistent. She was a thief who broke into high buildings and homes, where most security would be light. Pro-heroes and police were after her for months. Then suddenly out of nowhere she was found just like the rest of his victims. Only difference was that she looked to have fallen from a high building and damaged her spine. If ever awoken, she would be in a wheelchair her whole life. Why was she found in such a way? Well, Izuku was stalking her for weeks, and every time he got close to catching her she would escape. There was one encounter he remembered fondly. He had the beautiful lady cornered in an alley. But before he could do the deed, he hesitated. Back then he was still scared of using his quirk. And ashamed of it. Why he did it was because of hunger. Anyways, just as he decided on what to do, Selena did something unexpected. She pulled down off his cap and kissed him out of nowhere. Shocking, and leaving Izuku in a confused and hot mess. Before he knew it, she escaped. Izuku pondered for a week straight on what to do. Why did she do it? For kicks or something else? After some thinking, Izuku decided it didn't matter. She saw his face. Which meant she was a problem. One he needed to deal with. A few days later, Izuku cornered her again. After some banter, she smiled and tried to escape by jumping to another building. But it was too far, so to his horror she fell. Right into a deserted street and onto a car. Izuku rushed down to her. She was in pain and wanted it to stop. She begged him to make it stop. And so he did. He explained how his quirk worked and why he was doing this. In turn, she laughed and smiled weakly. And with all the strength she could muster, she pulled off his mask and looked right into his eyes. Then she drifted away as he took her quirk. Of all the terrible things he's ever done, this one affected him the most. Because Selena didn't deserve such a fate. She only stole to feed herself and make a better life for herself. Her parents died when she was young. Jumping from foster home to foster home, she finally decided to take fate into her own hands. She was funny, caring, and helped people less fortunate when needed. Selena Hopper was a hero in her own way. Izuku would forever regret what he did to her. He wondered at times if he cared for her. At least I had a crush on her. After all, she was his first kiss. Either way, Izuku carried a part of her with him. And he will always treasure that. He remembered a quote she would always say at the end of a heist. No regrets, only time to live to the fullest. High Vault, the ability to jump extremely high and long distances. Before training, he could jump high to about 80 feet. How far he could jump from one place to another was about 50 feet. Limitations were that he could only jump continuously for 5 to 10 minutes as his feet and legs grew weaker. Now, after training with All Might, Izuku could now jump as high as 100 feet and over 80 feet from one place to another. He could outjump All Might. Though there was a downside. If doing this, he could only jump for 5 minutes at best. If going over here risks injury and severe exhaustion. So doing what he's been doing before training seems best. More time needed to know more. Infernal Torch Quirk. Type. A hybrid of emitter and transformation. Originally called pyrokinesis, Izuku took All Might's advice. This quirk was very difficult to take. The original user was an arsonist and murderer by the name of Kakai Yamamoto. From what he saw in the few memories he got, Kakai came from a rich and prestigious family. His mother died shortly after he was born and his father was a no-show, who apparently didn't want anything to do with Kakai. Apparently he was a well-known and famous hero, who was most likely Endeavor, though he couldn't prove that, especially since there haven't been any reports of him having a fifth child with his wife. Anyways, Kakai grew up with his grandparents who raised and cared for him. He had a normal if not good upbringing, got good grades and had friends, even a boyfriend. Unfortunately, that all changed when Kakai's boyfriend was killed in an accident. The result was deeply disturbed Kakai. So much that he burned down his home with his grandparents and the help still inside. He was on the run after that. The police and heroes are looking for him. Endeavor being one of the most active of them all, which only made him more of a suspect of being Kakai's father. Eventually he and Izuku met in an abandoned junkyard. The resulting fight lasted hours. Kakai tried his best to kill him, but Izuku used his wits and his quirks accordingly. Finally he disabled him with his pacify. He barely struggled as he took his quirk. When he saw glimpses of Kakai's life, Izuku wondered if what he was doing was worth it. If such an incident could cause a person like Kakai to walk down a dark path, then what hope did he have? Kakai wasn't an evil person. He was just a person who needed help. Every day Izuku prayed that he would never end up like Kakai. Infernal Torch, the ability to summon and control fire. Before training and help from All Might and others, Izuku could only shoot a few flames at a time before becoming tired. At times he could produce a strong burst of flames to propel himself off the ground a few feet. He could also engulf his hands, arms, and legs in flames if he wanted to. Limitations were that he could only use this quirk for a few minutes at best. Overuse risked severe burns and overheating. Now Izuku could still only use his quirk for a short time. But thanks to training, he could produce more powerful flames, larger fireballs, and streams of flames. He could even cover half his face and whole upper body in flames now, with little risk of burns or overheating. His limitations were still the same. Only difference was that he worked through the heat and pain. Something that worried his mom and All Might a little. But his hero was proud of him. There was a thing Izuku found curious about his quirk. You see, Kakai's flames were black and hotter, while his were green and was hot as a normal flame. What did it mean? Maybe in time he could figure out why. More time needed to know more. Terraform quirk. Type: transformation. Originally called stone mimicry. This was quite the difficult quirk to get. The original user was a common loan shark and enforcer for the local gangs in the area. His name was Ito Sato. Probably the second most horrible person Izuku had was the displeasure of meeting. Ito did time in prison for a while. When he got out he became more dangerous. He's committed a dozen crimes including robbery, assault and murder. He was the lowest of scum that preyed on the weak. Izuku heard stories about him from local lowlife and rumors about how Ito was a monster. Intrigued by this man, our hero tracked him down for weeks at best. When he finally found him, the fight was long and hard. It lasted for hours because he couldn't get past Ito's quirk. When the dust cleared, Izuku was beaten. Ito was about to kill him but took pity on him. So, he left into the night. After reaching home and hiding his injuries, Izuku decided to recover first before doing anything nuts. A week later Izuku went back on the hunt for Ito. It took 3 whole days before he found him held up in an abandoned hotel. But the whole gang of his friends and allies. He suffered a lot of injuries that night. It was a miracle he survived. He was shot, stabbed, and beaten. That night he could have taken a lot of quirks. But his sights were on Ito. After taking care of Ito's goons, Izuku faced off against Ito. There were a few close calls. But in the end he won. The Stalker had defeated the monster. Terraform, the ability to turn into stone. While not as flashy as most quirks, this one compensated well enough. In this form Izuku was stronger and tougher. Yet he was also slow and heavy. An even trade-off. The stone he turned into was grey and a bit white. Limitations were that he could only take so much damage while in this form. He was just stone after all. It frightened him a little when thinking of what would happen if something would break off and he returned to normal. What would happen if he was destroyed into nothing? Training really didn't approve much of this quirk. It would seem only time will tell. More time needed to know more. High definition quirk. Type: emitter. Originally called sound emission. Izuku found this quirk quite fascinating along with the scientists and doctors. Originally belonging to a street thug by the name of Kenji Shiki. who unluckily stumbled onto Izuku when his hunger was very active. Poor guy didn't stand a chance. It was lucky that Kenji wasn't the most innocent person in the world. Guy had multiple charges of assault and attempted murder. Izuku didn't get much out of Kenji when he took his quirk. Only that he had a rough upbringing and hated heroes. Also found out that the guy might have liked kids a bit too much. Thankfully he got the guy before he could do anything. High definition, the ability to emit a shockwave of sound from one's hands. Sounds emitted at such force are able to push some objects and even people. The sounds can annoy people to drop their guard. If emitted at a higher frequency it can also cause ears to bleed and render some people unconscious. Limitations were that sound can only travel so far. And not so good underground either. Before training Izuku could only activate this quirk for 5 minutes at best. Now he could do it for about 10 or less. The strength of his sounds have gotten better too. More time needed to know more. Pied Piper quirk. Type. Emitter. A curious quirk that belonged to an information broker. A person who could get info on anyone. Even pro heroes. Unfortunately Mr. Retro, as he liked to call himself, messed with the wrong person. While on the hunt for quirks, Izuku was contacted by Mr. Retro by a message from a rat. Apparently Mr. Retro wanted to meet. At first Izuku was going to ignore it and go about his night. Unfortunately that changed when in the message Retro called him by his full name. Eventually Izuku met Mr. Retro in his hideout. They talked and Mr. Retro revealed how he knew his true identity. It was because of his quirk. Being able to connect and command rodents was a nifty one. Turns out Retro was a fan of Izuku's work. He also found his quirk very interesting. Why, you may ask? Well, it looked like Mr. Retro had some enemies and rivals that needed to be gone. Killing would only make the criminal underworld suspicious. But if they were suddenly taken out of commission by the Stalker, that's just bad luck. Being who he was, Izuku refused and was about to leave. Unfortunately he stopped when Mr. Retro threatened to expose his identity to the criminal underworld, local authorities, and the press. He was so smug about it, like he had Izuku backed into a corner. Yet it turned out Mr. Retro's hubris would be his undoing. Izuku didn't even flinch when he took his quirk and left him there. With his rodents. After that Izuku was steadily becoming infamous. Innocent people and criminals alike were beginning to fear him. Heroes and police along with some criminals were on the lookout for him. Taking out Mr. Retro only put more fuel on the fire. The Stalker was a name to be feared. Like most, Izuku didn't get a lot from Mr. Retro. Not much from her personal life. Not even his real name. All he got was that the information broker liked to live alone and knew a lot. Like a lot. Specifically potential targets for the Stalker to visit. Pied Piper, the ability to control rodents. A rather strange quirk to say the least. From what Izuku had gathered, this quirk is most useful for reconnaissance, sabotage, and maybe for distraction. This is how Mr. Retro became such a good info broker. Most wouldn't look for something so small as a rodent. Another unique thing about the quirk is that one could see through a controlled rodent's eyes. Which was kind of unsettling at first, but you'd get used to it. Limitations were that Izuku could only control 2 or 3 rodents over long distances. Trying to control multiple rodents is very hard. He could only give a command or 2 before losing control. Lately he's been able to control more rodents. Before that fateful night he was caught, he would use this quirk to look for prime targets. He was told that in time his quirk would improve. More time needed to know more. Sawdust quirk. Type. Emitter. A simple and not too powerful quirk. At least that's what it sounds like. In fact it was quite powerful if you know how to use it. Unfortunately the original user used it for terrible reasons. Sawdust could be used as a weapon. A rather dangerous weapon. A dust explosion is the rapid combustion of fine particles suspended in the air. A trick Izuku used to break out of jail. This quirk originally belonged to Hayashi Takahashi. A very disturbed man who loved fire. Very, very deeply. When he was young his family was killed in a fire. His parents, grandparents, and siblings. All of them. Instead of helping like anyone should. He stood there and watched the flames dance as his family screamed as they died. Later in life Hayashi committed multiple acts of arson. Which ended with someone getting hurt or dying. He would use his quirk and then throw a lighted match and watch the flames. Pro heroes and police searched for him and he would always get away. Too bad for him. While getting ready to burn down a small hospital, Izuku found him and took his quirk. Just like that. A serial arsonist and murderer was taken down. Not by a hero seeking attention or doing what's right. But by him a boy gives in to his darker side. Sawdust, the ability to create sawdust. Izuku really never used this quirk. Only when he had no other quirk to rely on. He mostly used it to throw in an enemy's eyes for a distraction or escape. Causing explosions was never his thing. But he would use it if necessary. Lately he's been able to produce more sawdust at a faster rate. Nothing special, but nothing terrible. More time needed to know more. Force redirection quirk. Type. Transformation. Originally called lightning rod. This quirk was quite a trouble to take. Why, you may ask? Well, turns out that lightning really didn't have much to do with this quirk. Kind of hard to take someone down when they can redirect your attacks. Original user was Chiba Sugimoto, a man who was hired to kill the Stalker. Turned out when he was the Stalker and doing his thing, Izuku was making people nervous. Really nervous. Some local gang lord hired Chiba to take him out. From what Izuku saw, Chiba wasn't much of a hitman. He's only killed 1 or 2 people, and that's because of pure luck. He had a pretty normal childhood, and when he was old enough he decided to become a hitman. Because it was exciting. While others refused to take up the Stalker's hit, he did it for publicity. When they did meet, a long fight followed. Every time Izuku attacked Chiba he would just redirect somewhere else. Eventually Chiba grew tired and Izuku took his chance and took him down. Maybe Chiba should have chosen a different career path. Force redirection, the ability to redirect attacks somewhere else. Works better with elemental attacks. But normal attacks work just as well. Extremely uncomfortable when activating this quirk when getting attacked, especially by a powerful one. While redirecting the power of the attack somewhere else, you can still feel the force and a bit of pain from it. The user could only last a few minutes before becoming overwhelmed. Same limitations applied. Apparently only time will tell if this quirk will improve. More time needed to know more. Iron quirk. Type. Transformation. The quirk Izuku acquired a month ago. On that fateful night. When he escaped he took on 3 prisoners who were locked up with him when he got captured. They tried to use the guard he knocked out as a hostage. Even threatened him if he wasn't with them. Unfortunately for them his hunger was in full control then. It was a tough fight, but Izuku took down all 3 of them and escaped. But not without some serious injuries. The original user was Seino Mitsuno, a local thief and armed robber, who used his quirk to break into tough places. He thought with most thieves and robbers leaving Mustafu in droves, it will be easy with less competition. He thought wrong and was arrested. Of all the tough people Izuku has fought, Seino was probably a close third. Iron Make, the ability to transform the user's limbs and certain parts of their body into metal. How this is possible is by using the iron in one's blood. With this quirk one could also morph the metal into weapons, shields, and other objects. Limitations are by how much mass and blood it takes. If broken, it would be like losing a good amount of blood. Not like a limb thankfully. One could also make sharp spikes appear from any part of one's body. After training Izuku had better defenses and could morph better weapons and objects. His fight with Katsuki drove him to that, though his limitations remained. More time needed to know more. Multi-vision quirk. Type. Transformation. Another quirk Izuku acquired a month from one of the prisoners. Unlike the other 2 this was quite easy to acquire. The user before him was a small-time crook and peeping Tom by the name Onoishi. Poor guy had a small charge and was about to be released the next day. Sure he was a creep and a crook. But man, compared to the 2 other guys he was a small fish. Before taking down Seino and the other prisoner, Izuku went straight for Ono because he knew he was the weakest. Multi-vision, the ability to change one's vision. Night vision, thermal vision, mild X-ray, and a thing called battle vision. When people are activated, some objects seem to slow down, causing one's reaction time to improve. Something he has yet to fully master. All useful. Limitations were that using this quirk excessively could cause fatigue and temporary blindness. Battle vision only hastens this when active. No training has improved these abilities or their drawbacks. Not yet anyways. More time needed to know more. Hell Magma quirk. Type. Transformation. Originally called Molten Hands. Yet another quirk Izuku acquired during his escape. And the most difficult and dangerous. This quirk really affected Izuku. He had the scars to prove it. The original user was Godo Hasegawa, a steel mill worker who was very temperamental, with a dangerous quirk to boot. Godo was a murderer, apparently he was caught killing his boss after work. He choked the man while his quirk was activated. The magma was so hot that it went through the skin in minutes and reached the bone. The guy's boss was basically beheaded. What disturbed Izuku the most was that Godo enjoyed every minute of it. From what he got, Godo had a rough childhood, had a wife and 2 kids, and would beat them and treat them like dirt anytime he could. All the frustrations of work and his hard upbringing made him into a monster. Out of all the people Izuku has ever fought, Godo was the most dangerous. He pushed him to the edge. Hurt him so badly that he was afraid to use his quirk. That's why he changed its name. It would be so easy to kill someone with this quirk. He only got touched for a few seconds. And he could still remember the pain and the smell of burnt flesh. Magma, the ability to transform one's hands into molten magma. With this quirk one could hurt or even kill someone in a matter of minutes. Hotter than most fire vase quirk, maybe even Endeavor's. This quirk could arguably be his second strongest, but also the most dangerous. Limitations were that in a few minutes the user would feel fatigued. Though all you need is a few minutes to do some serious damage. Or kill someone. All Might and the others wanted to see this quirk in action. But Izuku hesitated. Eventually All Might was able to convince him that he would need to accept and learn to control all his quirk. No matter what they were used for or how dangerous they were. If he wanted to be a hero he needed to accept that. After some training, Izuku could hold Hellflame for 10 minutes. 15 if needed. He would still get tired, but he powered through it. More time needed to know more. Izuku stopped reading finally. He sure liked to read his work at times. He looked at his clock on his desk and saw it was 8 AM. Man, he sure wrote a lot. Well, leave it to him to over-explain things. All Might is probably up by now. Mom should be close behind. Izuku muttered to himself as he stretched his arms out. Ms. Todoroki won't be here until later. Recovery girl and those other doctors won't do their usual checkup until next week. Looks like all I have to do after breakfast is train. The day looked to be a rather good one. For him anyways. Still there would be his security detail watching him closely, as always today. Another pro hero to babysit him while All Might would go out to do his daily stuff. And his mom either cooks or watches TV all day. As Izuku was about to get up to start his day, a mild yet sharp headache hit him. He groaned a little as he held his head. Soon he began to hear what sounded like voices. Why? You took everything from me. It wasn't your fault. It's all your fault. Stop it. Izuku whispered as he softly groaned in pain. Should have killed you when I had the chance. Monster. Villain. You're a monster. Please stop. Izuku whimpered out as he looked ready to cry. I had no choice. I know. Doesn't matter. You had no right. You'll never be a hero. Freak. Izuku began to cry a little as the voices got louder. He softly fell to the ground and curled up in a ball. You had no choice. There's always a choice. You won't ever stop. Gonna hurt your mom next, freak. You're weak. You will always be like us. All Izuku could do was try to block them out. But he couldn't. He never will. No matter how much he cried or pleaded they would never stop. Ever since he got caught they've only been getting worse. Since then he's never told anybody. Not All Might, Recovery Girl, his tutor or even his mom. Because they wouldn't understand. No one would ever understand. I'm sorry. Izuku wept softly. Suddenly all the voices went quiet. All that Izuku heard was the soft ticking of his clock. And his weeping. This is what his hunger led to. His gifts, his burdens, his regrets. He always wanted a quirk. But not like this. He would stay like that for half an hour. Then he would get up and act like it never happened. Just like always. Today was hopefully going to be a better day. I'm sorry. Izuku wept softly. Suddenly all the voices went quiet. All that Izuku heard was the soft ticking of his clock. And his weeping. This is what his hunger led to. His gifts, his burdens, his regrets. He always wanted a quirk. But not like this. He would stay like that for half an hour. Then he would get up and act like it never happened. Just like always. Today was hopefully going to be a better day. An hour later. Izuku was at a large table in a very sizable kitchen. Right now he was eating some breakfast his mom had made. He wasn't alone, as his mom was sitting across from him eating too. She had just woken up half an hour ago. First thing she did was to check in on Izuku. Then did what she did best. Cooking. As both mother and son were eating. A familiar face entered the kitchen. Ah, young Midoriya. Good to see you up. All Might said with a smile. He then turned to Inko. Good morning, Mrs. Midoriya. I hope you slept well. Inko gave a caring smile. I slept wonderfully. Thank you for asking, Mr. Yagi. Since moving in things were awkward at first. Being forced to move in with a total stranger was hard. But eventually they found a way to make it work. The ones who settled in first nicely were All Might and Izuku's mom. As both his mentor and mom began to chat with one another. Izuku just sat there quietly eating. While looking miserable. This morning was rough. Remembering all that stuff was hard. The voices though they were worse. It sucked. Not being able to tell anyone. But he needed to keep it secret. Until he could figure out why this was happening. Not wanting to look too miserable in front of everyone. Izuku grabbed a remote that was nearby and turned on the TV hooked into the kitchen wall. Turns out All Might had a bunch here and there in the mansion. Breaking news, authorities and pro-heroes were called in this morning at the local college to disperse a demonstration that turned violent. Students and other individuals who are calling themselves the Prey gathered and were demanding Izuku Midoriya Aka the Stalker to be immediately released from custody, wherever he is being held. Everyone's attention went to the TV as the news report continued. Both All Might and Inko shot Izuku with concerned looks. It has only been a month since the Stalker was apprehended and revealed to be one Izuku Midoriya. And yet Japan and the rest of the world are still feeling the aftermath, among other things. Since the Stalker was taken into custody, there has been no word of what has happened to him. No trial or verdicts were ever publicly made, and any contact from his mother, Inko Midoriya, have revealed nothing because Mrs. Midoriya has been taken into protective custody for her own safety. This morning was another incident of violence, as many protesters got violent by defacing public property and assaulting college security and police. Some even going so far as using their quirks with malicious intent. Eventually pro-heroes called and helped disperse the crowd and make arrests. The Prey have made a public response on social media. They were outraged by police, pro-heroes, and the justice and court system as a whole. Here's the video now. On the TV it showed an individual facing the camera. He or she was wearing the exact same set of clothes Izuku wore as the Stalker, and was talking in a distorted voice. The day's demonstration was only the beginning. We will not stop until our savior, our hero, is released. Izuku Midoriya. The Stalker has shown us the way. We will not stop until all follow the gospel of our cause. We are Prey. Nothing more, nothing less. Our fate is up to the true hero of our time. Not the false idols like All Might or Endeavor. Those to have fallen to our savior have been saved. We demand our savior be released immediately. And the location of the woman who gave birth to him. For we shall give our lives to protect her from the fools who want to hurt our savior. Remember, we are the Prey. And our savior is the almighty hunter. The TV then showed the news report again. The group known as the Prey have gotten only stronger since the Stalker's incarceration. Authorities speculate their reach has spread far to the rest of the world. Copycats have also surfaced. Just yesterday a man was murdered trying to stop a mugging well dressed as the Stalker. The man is survived by his wife and 3. The TV was suddenly turned off by All Might, who had just about heard enough. He sighed as he looked over to Izuku. He looked very troubled as his head was lowered. All of that was my fault, wasn't it? Izuku asked timidly as he looked up at his mom and mentor. That guy is dying. This crazy group and copycats. It's all because of me. Immediately Inko got up and walked around the table to Izuku. Once there she gave him a reassuring hug. Oh, honey. None of this is your fault. It's just some people aren't good. Like me, Izuku said in a low tone, not bothering to look up. Inko was shocked, she then looked lost. She didn't know what to say. Thankfully All Might stepped in. Izuku, you can't undo what you did. You may be guilty. But it's up to you to make up for it. All Might said as he walked over to Izuku. Placing a hand on his shoulder he smiled. In 10 months UA will start. There you'll get the chance to make things right, my boy. I'm trying to get you on a recommendation, but Izawa and a few others are hesitant. Don't worry though. You'll get in. That would have brightened Izuku's mood. But not today. The voices, the memories, and all this bad news. It was getting to him. He needed to be alone. Surprising both his mom and All Might, he got up. I'm gonna do my usual workout. Please come get me when Ms. Todoroki gets here. Izuku stated as he walked past his mom and headed out. Thanks for breakfast, mom. I'll see you at training, All Might. Be safe out today too. He left after that, leaving Inko and All Might alone. All Might looked down at Inko to see she was hurting. This last month has been hard on her. Not just for Izuku. My son. Sometimes he acts like he isn't my son, Mr. Yagi. I see it when he looks at me. Softly said with hurt and worry in her eyes. She looked up at All Might looking ready to cry. His eyes are just like his dad's when he had to leave. So cold and filled with regret. What is happening to my son? She soon started to cry after that. All Might acted on instinct and walked over and hugged her. Surprising her. He's hurting. He blames himself for all this. He feels like the whole world is on his shoulders. I know the feeling. But at least he's not alone. He has you, Inko, and me too if that helps. Give him time. If it becomes a problem we'll talk to him. Together. Inko looked up at All Might, who kept on giving her that signature smile. He looked and sounded so sure of himself. She couldn't help but feel reassured. With a small smile and faint blush she hugged All Might back. Thank you, Toshinori. As that was happening Izuku walked outside. He took a deep breath of the fresh air. It calmed him a bit. That changed however when he saw 2 police officers posted by the gates, keeping a close eye on him. But the frown Izuku sighed a little as he headed off on his morning jog. After that some weight training in the weight room, then his usual routine. All that until Ms. Todoroki comes for his lessons. This was his usual routine. It wasn't the best. But it was his life. And he had to live with that. He had to live with a lot of things. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city. In a slum somewhere. Where criminals and other undesirable people lived or hid. Right now in a dark alley, two low-life criminals were meeting. "Why did you call me here?" The person asking was an abnormally giant man. His quirk was clearly activated. He had a rough beastly appearance. He had a horse-like head with brown hair styled into dreadlocks and a beard. He wore a torn and tattered shirt as well as an average pair of jeans with no shoes. His quirk looked to be some kind of gigantification type. "Because we both have a score to settle." The other person, if you can call it that, was a huge mass of sludge or mud of some kind. He, at least that's what it sounded like, had a dark nasty green color with big eyes and sharp teeth. It was likely his quirk was a mutant or transformation type. Either way, he looked intimidating. The Stalker is gone. What he did to the boss is over and done. Well, I wouldn't mind killing that brat or his sweet little mother. The pro heroes are stepping their game up. The giant started with a sneer. "Whatever you have planned will probably get us caught or worse." Sludge snorted as he oozed closer to the giant. "It's not about our old boss's fool." Sato had it coming. "No, what I'm talking about is making a statement. For all those idiots who think that the Stalker is untouchable." Sludge explained, showing his teeth. "You and I sneak into town. Grab some hostages and give some demands." This caught the giant's interest. "What do you mean demands?" "Heh." Sludge chuckled. "We demand a fair sum of money, of course. A way out of this stupid country. And the Stalker himself. Or his mother. Either one would settle nicely." "What about the cops and pro heroes? They'll be on us just like that," the giant said, snapping his fingers. "What are we gonna do then?" Sludge just kept smiling. "We'll grab some brats and maybe some random bitch or two. Cops won't do a thing and the pros won't either. Risking hostages will ruin their images they all so care about." Sludge explained. "If things go south, we make a quick escape and kill the hostages. Besides, it's not like All Might, the rest of those assholes are still hanging around. Trust me, this plan will go without a hitch." It sounded like a good plan. Besides, the giant wanted some quick cash. This seemed like a good way. Also, getting some payback wouldn't be so bad either. "Fine. When do we start?" An evil grin never left Sludge's face. "Today, this afternoon. A few hours with Izuku." "Izuku? Izuku? Izuku, are you paying attention?" Izuku looked forward with a small gasp. A moment ago he was dozing off in his chair. He looked down on his desk to see some schoolwork he finished working on and a college-level psychology book and a very interesting book. By the name of Activating Evolution by Chandra Suresh. The father of Mohinder Suresh, the world's oldest and best geneticist today. He practically wrote everything there is about quirks. All the notebooks he wrote were because of him. Izuku looked up to see his tutor standing over him with a worried look. "Are you okay?" Fayumi Todoroki asked. It's been a month since Ms. Todoroki became his home tutor. A very secret and dangerous job. Not from him, but from others who would want nothing more than to find the whereabouts of him and his mother. Izuku was hesitant to get a tutor. Especially since the whole world knew who he was. But All Might and the authorities told him to go for it. If he wanted a chance to join the UA and become a hero. After a week or two of looking and background checking, they finally found someone who was willing to tutor him. Fayumi Todoroki, daughter of Enji Todoroki Aka, the No. 2 hero Endeavor. From what Izuku heard, Endeavor wasn't happy hearing his daughter was tutoring him. The guy hated his guts. Why? Well, maybe making his possible illegitimate son a vegetable had something to do with it. Anyways, his first meeting with Fayumi was awkward. Eventually though, Izuku came to like Fayumi. She also took a shine to him as well. After tutoring him and talking to him, she knew he was just a very unlucky and misunderstood kid. Right now he and Fayumi are studying. Turns out All Might had two. Both he rarely used. Eventually it was decided this one would be where he would take his lessons from now on. Thankfully he was able to continue where he left off from his education. At the pace he's going he should be able to join the UA in no time. That's what he hoped at least. I'm looking for Ms. Todoroki. Izuku stammered with an embarrassed blush. Just thinking about something. This got a relieved smile from Fayumi. Causing Izuku to blush even more. Well, he wouldn't openly admit it. He found Fayumi very attractive. She was also very caring and smart too. That's good. You've been doing great. You finished your assignment so fast. I shouldn't be surprised considering it's you, of course. Fayumi said, giving Izuku a small pat on the head. Making him smile nervously and blush even more. She suddenly noticed the books Izuku had. Wow, those are college-level books, Izuku. Fayumi was surprised by what they read. I didn't know you were interested in psychology and activating evolution. My grandparents said that book was once a joke. Now it's the world's third best-selling book. College students and inspiring geneticists read that stuff religiously. Izuku was silent as he tried to figure out what to say. He's been looking deep in psychology to see if it can help with his problem. The book Activating Evolution was something he was reading recently so he could understand his quirks better. His main one specifically. Yeah, I'm just interested in a lot of things. Ms. Todoroki. Izuku lied, giving out a sheepish smile. Just keeping my options open if UA doesn't pan out. It's good to hear, Izuku. Fayumi said. Ms. Todoroki. Can I ask you a question? Of course, Izuku. He stammered at first, trying to ask his question but couldn't. Finally, a few moments later he grew courage. Why did you take this job? Knowing full well what kind of person I am? Izuku asked, giving Fayumi a sad look. I mean, I'm not a good person. People are either afraid of me or they hate me. Not that I'd blame them. His head dropped a little as he remembered this morning. Some even think I'm some sort of hero or savior. That crazy group and those copycats. Every terrible thing that happens I can't help but feel like it's my fault. Izuku confessed, still feeling down. How can a good, kind person like yourself stand up to me? Things grew very quiet after that. Izuku sat there looking like the whole world was after him. Well, Fayumi couldn't help but feel sorry for him. With a small smile she placed a caring hand on his head, making him look up with a surprised expression and faint blush. Oh Izuku, I might have been nervous to tutor you at first. But after meeting and getting to know you, I knew you were just a misunderstood boy who's hit a rough time. You are a smart and sweet kid. Not some villain or monster. Don't let what others think or do get you down. It's no one's fault but their own. So please, stop looking so down and show me that smile of yours. There were a lot of things Izuku was expecting. But not this. To see Fayumi smiling down at him. That's when he remembered All Might and his mom. They didn't hate or fear him. If a person like Fayumi could think that way about him, maybe he had a chance to change how people saw him. Thank you, Ms. Todoroki. Izuku thanked with a smile as he raised his head up. He got a smile and a nod from Fayumi. Suddenly she looked at the nearest clock and that smile dropped slightly. Well, it looks like our session is over for today, Izuku. You did awesome today. Keep this up and the UA won't know what hit them. Fayumi started happily as she began to gather all her stuff and Izuku's finished work. You know, my little brother is going to the UA too. I just know that both of you will make us proud. Oh, that's cool. What's your brother like? That's when Fayumi's mood dropped a little. Her brother was a hard and distant person. Could be considered cold to many. Just like their father. Even though he would never ever admit it. Shoto acted more like their father. He could sometimes appear aloof. Keeps to himself mostly. Even around me. But it's just that he's had a rough start. Just like you. Fayumi explained with a sad smile. If you do get to meet him or end up in the same class with him, can you try and be his friend? Might be cold at first, but can you try? Please. Izuku was surprised. He also couldn't say no to a face like that. Blushing like a fool again, he nervously smiled and nodded. Sure, Ms. Todoroki. Izuku said, smiling. I'll try. Fayumi was so happy to hear that. She gave Izuku a small hug, which quickly turned him into a blushing and muttering fool. Thank you, Izuku. Fayumi said as she stopped hugging him. She then took a look at the clock and sighed. My train is almost here. Better leave before I miss it. I'm proud of you, Izuku. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. So try to keep a clear mind and not to worry so much. Okay. Our hero didn't say a word. He just nodded while trying not to look weird as he was still flustered. Good. Fayumi said. See you tomorrow, Izuku. Tell you mom I said bye. She headed out of the room. Soon it was just Izuku. Hearing the front door close. He took a deep breath and sighed in relief. Man, I am such a weirdo. Izuku mumbled to himself bitterly. Hope Fayumi doesn't get weirded out. Suddenly Izuku realized what he said. I mean MS. Todoroki. Izuku exclaimed in realization and embarrassment. After that Izuku slammed his head on his desk. With another sigh he frowned. Fayumi Todoroki. She was a kind and smart woman. One of the few who didn't fear or hate him. It made him happy to hear those caring words from earlier. Yet he still felt regret. This time it was about Ms. Todoroki. What would she think of him if she knew what he did to Kakai? The original owner of his fire quirk, Infernal Torch. There was a very good chance he was her brother. At least from what he's gathered. How Endeavor acted all but confirmed it. Kakai was a very disturbed person. He lost a loved one and went on a rampage and became something else. A villain. He probably didn't deserve what Izuku did to him. He was once a good person, maybe with help he could have been one again. What am I going to tell her if she asks? Izuku asked himself with a frown. He didn't want to think about the look she would give him if he told her. Would she change her mind about me? Maybe I am a monster. There he was again. Feeling sorry for himself. Being alone never made him feel good. Not at all. Wanting to do something else rather than sulk. He grabbed his books and put them away. But before doing so he turned activating evolution around and saw a picture of Chandra Surish. If you knew quirks were coming, did you know a person like me would exist? Silence, that's all he got. With a small frown he put the book away and headed outside. Usually All Might would join him, helping him to control and use his quirks better. But he was in Tokyo. Some big pro meeting or something. So it was just him for today. His mom was probably planning dinner or watching TV. There were only so little things she could do. Once outside he took a look around and saw the guards at their post. Man, you took so freaking long in there. Was bored just sitting here. Izuku immediately jumped and exclaimed in surprise. He looked to see who startled him and was surprised to see who it was. It was Mount Lady. With a bored and mildly annoyed expression, the pro hero walked over to Izuku and stared down at him. She was so close that her breasts were inches away from his face. Thankfully he was doing his best to look up at her. Unfortunately he was blushing and blubbering a little. Geez, I thought babysitting the Stalker would be exciting. But you've been a bit of a letdown, Izuku. Mount Lady complains childishly as she sets a mock glare at Izuku. Come on. Can't you at least try to do something exciting? Since being placed in All Might's custody, Izuku had to be watched by a pro hero 24/7. Thankfully it was All Might who watched him most of the day. But there were times he had to leave for hero business or other such things. So, when that happens a pro hero is called to watch over him. A total of 3 heroes have watched over him. Not including All Might. Death Arms watched from time to time. Those were pretty awkward. Maybe it had something to do with breaking Kamui Wood's arm. He heard they were pretty close. But Death Arms was a nice enough guy. One bad thing about him was that he was a smoker. Izuku remembered when his mom caught him smoking around him. Boy did she give him a talking. Izuku's never seen a pro hero so scared before in his life. Another person was a blue genist. Which was shocking. Apparently he only did it to get red on Izuku. He was curious about him and his quirks. They talked and got to know each other very well. There was one time the fiber hero wanted to give him a haircut. Thankfully All Might and his mom talked him out of it. Unfortunately Blue Genist could only watch over Izuku rarely. Being in the top 5 it was understandable. Still it was nice when he visited. The last person who watched him and was the most frequent was Mount Lady. Their first proper meeting was unexpected. You would think Mount Lady would be scared of him. At least hate him after their first meeting. He tried to take her to Quirk. But that wasn't the case. When they met again she seemed pretty laid back. A bit annoyed if anything. Watching over Japan's most infamous vigilante, you think she takes things a bit seriously. Nope, she even teased or startled Izuku trying to get him out of him from time to time. Mount Lady was a very eccentric person. When she spent time at Izuku she acted pretty normal. If not a bit annoyed or laid back. Still, she was a good person. Treated Izuku a bit strangely. Which was from teasing to borderline flirting. Either way it was just to mess with Izuku. Probably pay back for ruining her image after taking her down. Hi Mount Lady. Izuku greeted me while stammering. Sorry for making you wait. The poor guy began to bow, causing Mount Lady to sigh. Forget about it. You know the routine. You train and I watch. Mount Lady stated as she began to walk where the training area was. Which was in the back of the mansion. Don't do anything nuts. Or I'll have to squish you. Then I'll have your mom and All Might on my ass. Yep, very eccentric. Izuku shook his head lightly and followed Mount Lady. Both are completely unaware of what's going to happen very soon. Meanwhile in Tatooine shopping district. Things were bustling downtown. Since Izuku's arrest things have gotten pretty calm in the city. People weren't afraid to leave their homes anymore. Unfortunately that also meant low-lives and villains were beginning to come back. Many were happy that Izuku was gone. Save for a couple. Speaking of which. One was currently walking back home from school. Itsuki Bakugo. Izuku's former best friend. It's been a month since his fight with Izuku. And he's changed. Before getting his ass handed to Izuku, Kitsuki used to think he was top dog. Everyone at school and the neighborhood knew that. The kid with a powerful quirk is going to hit it big when he gets older. Trouble was that he knew that too. He was arrogant and strong. And he loved that. Unfortunately for him that all changed when he woke up in the hospital. After fighting Izuku. A fight he lost. After getting out of the hospital people looked at him differently. Word got out he was once friends with Izuku. Many grew wary of him from then on. It only got worse for him when people found out he confronted Izuku and lost. Now people only saw him as the guy who used to be friends with the Stalker. And the guy who couldn't beat him. His so-called friends moved on from him. Everyone looked down at him with pity. Something they once did for Izuku. Now they feared him. Because he was stronger. Or Kitsuki that pissed him off more than anything. He could care less what people thought about him. He didn't give a shit about friends either. Right now all he cared about was getting stronger. So one day he could find Izuku again. And prove that he's nothing but a pebble in his path. Deku. Wherever the hell you're hiding I will find you. Kitsuki thought bitterly with a scowl. I promise you that. While Kitsuki was walking him. He failed to notice 3 people were heading in the same direction as him. One was Fayumi, who was heading to the train station. This was a shortcut. The other 2 were quite strange. Big sis, can we stop at the park before we head back home? The little girl asked with a tadpole-like appearance. She was holding hands with a girl who sounded and looked to be her sister. She was a short girl with a frog-like appearance. She had long, dark sea green hair which was tied in a bow on her back. Her eyes were wide with pure black irises and distinctive lower eyelashes. Like a frog, she had a wide mouth. We'll see Satsuki. You know how mom gets when we don't head straight home. Sayu Asui told with a little ribbit. She looked down to see her sisters looking down sadly. I'm sorry Satsuki. But mom is still jumpy after that run she had with the Stalker. You understand, right? Satsuki didn't say a thing, she only nodded. On the night the Stalker was arrested, he unknowingly attacked their mother. Something that weighed her mind. Since then Sayu has been pushing herself more so she could join the UA and get accepted. So nothing like that would ever happen to anyone ever again. These 4 people have been affected by Izuku. In more ways than one. Now, they were going to be affected again by what Izuku did. As all 4 people walked in the same direction, completely unaware of each other. Like many around them. They failed to notice a large blob of sludge and a giant of a man on the rooftop looking down at them. Those 4 will do nicely. With an evil glint in their eyes. Both jumped down heading straight for their targets. Before anyone noticed it was too late. But Izuku. Izuku was using Terraform and was punching a giant log. His breathing was heavy, but he kept up his attack. As his stone hands punched the log over and over small pieces fell to the ground. Mount Lady was looked bored sitting under a tree with her phone out. Taking an eye off occasionally to look at Izuku. The guards around the mansion were at their posts. Either keeping watch or slacking off. This was a normal routine. This was the only few times Izuku got to use his quirks. The ankle monitor he had would immediately warn the authorities if he was using his quirks without authorization. Thankfully he had Mount Lady here. If she didn't check in a SWAT the team would be here in no time. A few minutes of punching the log Izuku stopped. His stone skin quickly disappeared. Suddenly his arms turned into metal, then like something out of a movie. They became long and thin turning into blades. With a yell Izuku began to cut the log like it was nothing. A few swipes later Izuku stopped and deactivated his Iron Make quirk. Pieces and splinters fell to the ground shortly after that. A small smile appeared on Izuku's face. Finally, All Might is going to be so happy. I cut that log pretty quick. Izuku said to himself as wiped any sweat off his forehead. Controlling Iron Make is getting a lot easier. Suddenly before he could say anything further. A faint explosion was heard in the distance. Izuku gasped in shock as he looked where it came from. Mount Lady got up in shock as she saw smoke where the explosion came from. It was where Tutoring shopping district was. Many of the guards looked too wondering what was going on. Izuku. Come inside quick. Izuku and Mount Lady looked to see Inko outside waving at them to follow. A look of worry on her face. She then ran back inside. In no time both Izuku and Mount Lady followed. Once inside they followed Inko into the living room. Where the flat screen TV was on. A news report was showing what was wrong. Breaking news. 2 villains are currently attacking the Tutoring shopping district. The 2 villains appeared out of nowhere and are holding 4 people hostage. 3 of them are children. Police and pro heroes are on the scene along with one of our own. Wait. I'm getting new information. It appears the villains are making demands. Our reporter on the scene is taking us live. The TV showed what was happening. The whole shopping district was in flames. People screaming in terror. Police and pro heroes trying to make sure everyone was safe. In the middle of all the chaos showed the giant and Sludge. Both of them are holding hostages. The giant had Sayu and Satsuki in one hand and Fayumi in the other. The little girl was crying while Sayu and Fayumi were struggling. Both couldn't use their quirks because if they did he would probably hurt them or kill them. Sludge had Katsuki struggling to get free as he was stuck inside his gooey body. It looked like when Katsuki would use his quirk Sludge would take control. And redirect it somewhere else. making more flames and destroying anything nearby. With an evil smile, Sludge looked at the camera. Our demands are simple. A 100 million in cash and an escape route with no cops or heroes. But what we want most of all is the Stalker or his mom. We know the cops have them somewhere. If our demands aren't met in 30 minutes, we start killing hostages. Starting with the brat. If any cops or heroes try anything funny, we start the killing early. Everyone in the room was shocked. No one said a word. A look of horror was on Izuku's face. Kaken, Fayumi, and those two girls were in danger. Because of him. Izuku dropped to his knees as he still couldn't believe it. His mother rushed to his side while Mount Lady didn't know what to do. Suddenly her phone went off. She was getting a text. She looked down to see it was from All Might. It read the following. Endeavor, and I am on the way now. Watch Midoriya. We'll handle this. Make sure Midoriya doesn't do something he'll regret. Mount Lady was conflicted. She wanted to head out to help. But she was being ordered not to. With a bitter sigh and expression, she put her phone away. All she could do was watch Izuku. She looked down to see Izuku still freaking out. Izuku, please say something. Inko begged, trying to get her son to say anything. Her son stayed silent. It's like time stopped for Izuku. His eyes were glued to the TV. All it showed was the hostage situation. He saw that little girl crying in fear. Ms. Todoroki looked afraid just like that other girl. Kaken tried to break free, but failed. Even he looked afraid. All of them were in danger. Because of him. It's all my fault. Inko and Mount Lady looked down at Izuku with concern then pity. Inko did what felt right and hugged her son. Mount Lady looked away in shame. With All Might and Endeavor. Japan's two top heroes were making their way to Musatafu as fast as they could. All Might was in his muscle form using all his speed and strength jumping towards the danger. Endeavor was close behind using his flames to speed him up and propel him in the air. When Endeavor got word of the situation, he shrugged it off. Wanting to let some other heroes do something about it. But when he heard that his daughter was among the hostages, he quickly acted. With a determined expression, he bolted out of the pro-hero meeting and headed towards the scene. All Might went after him. It involved Izuku and he felt obligated. He also couldn't let those people be in danger either. I told Mount Lady the situation, All Might yelled to Endeavor. In case Izuku does something crazy. Don't worry, Enji, we'll save your daughter and those kids. Endeavor didn't say a word. He only growled and hastened his speed, causing All Might to do the same. He'd be damned if he was going to lose another one of his children. Both heroes were out of city limits and were going as fast as they could. Though even at this speed they won't make it in time. Back with Izuku. 10 minutes have passed. However, it felt longer for Izuku. He felt so helpless. Seeing those people in danger because of him. The police and pro-heroes couldn't do anything. Not if they wanted to risk Kaken and the others. Those villains were serious. They'll kill everyone if their demands aren't met. Izuku hated this. He was lost. What could he do? That's when he realized something. He could do something. They wanted him, well, they're going to get him. He knew it was crazy and he'd be risking everything that All Might gave him. But he couldn't stand by and let this happen. It isn't what All Might taught him. He knew he'd regret this, but it didn't matter. With a pained expression, he got up, causing his mom to let go and get up too. Mount Lady looked over to them, wondering what was happening. Izuku? Honey, what's wrong? Inko asked, very concerned. A sad and regretful smile filled Izuku's face as he looked down at his mom. His mother, who still loved him and worried for his well-being. Even after all this. The main reason why he became the Stalker was to protect her. Now, Kaken and the others needed protecting. I love you, Mom. Izuku stated proudly as he kissed her forehead. Before she could say or do anything, Izuku activated his toxic haze quirk. He blew the haze right onto her face and she immediately went unconscious. He caught her before she hit the ground and gently placed her on the couch. Mount Lady, seeing what was happening, tried to use her quirk, even though they were indoors. But was stopped when Izuku used his pacifier. I'm sorry, but I have to do this. Izuku sadly said with a frown. He then lifted Mount Lady in the air and brought her closer to him. She of course struggled but couldn't break free. If something happens to me, tell everyone I'm sorry and thank you for giving me a second chance. Also thank you, Mount Lady, for not seeing me like a monster. Be damn it. Izuku, don't do this. Mount Lady yelled out, still struggling to get free. Izuku smiled sadly and brought her so close to him their faces were inches apart. He then deactivated Pacify and blew his toxic haze onto her. Before Mount Lady could do something, she went limp and fell to the ground. Fortunately, Izuku caught her and placed her next to his mom. Seeing them both knocked, Izuku shook his head sadly. This was the only way. With a worried but determined look, Izuku ran up the stairs. heading for his room. Once there he went to the closest and saw what he needed. His stalker outfit, at least part of one. He had a gray new trench coat and a new baseball cap. That's it. Better than nothing. Izuku mumbled as he grabbed the coat and cap. After getting them on he sighed. He never thought he would look like this again. Suddenly Izuku heard a big commotion from downstairs. Like a door was just busted down. He then realized something. His ankle bracket. It told the people monitoring it if he was using his quirks without permission. And since he knocked out Mount Lady she couldn't check in. Uh-oh. The mansion was surrounded by at least 5 cops, 2 were inside the mansion right now. All of them had their guns out. They got word that Izuku used 1 or 2 of his quirks inside. Which was very strange. They tried to get in contact with Mount Lady but got nothing when they called her phone. So they expected the worst. They also called in backup but everything was being sent to the hostage situation. I knew he was going to crack. One cop said to another. Before the other cop could say a word a loud crash was heard. Crash. They all looked to see Izuku jumping out of his room's window. He then landed safely on the ground and looked at the cops. With a nervous smile he waved. Then used his high vault. He jumped over the mansion's large fence like it was nothing. Before anyone could do anything like shoot. Izuku was gone. Heading straight where the smoke was. Where Ms. Todoroki, Kaken, and those girls were. And those villains. This is a bad idea. Izuku told himself. A little while later at the hostage situation. It's been 15 minutes or less. And the giant and Sludge were getting antsy. So were the police and pro-heroes on the scene. A huge crowd had gathered and was watching the situation unfold with a news crew there too. Tons of police from the low beat cop to SWAT were here. They along with the pro-heroes made a perimeter around the district. If these villains tried to escape they were not getting away. The pro-heroes that were present wanted to end this here and now. F-Arms being one of them. But they couldn't do a thing, not if they wanted to risk the hostages. They were told to wait because All Might and Endeavor were on the way. If anyone could end this hostage situation quickly and safely they could. The question was though could they get here in time? We got 5 minutes left or less. We better think of something. Death Arm said to the SWAT commander. All Might and Endeavor could be 10 or 20 minutes away. If we don't do anything quickly people are going to die. The commander stood there thinking for a while. Finally he nodded. What's taking so long? The giant yelled out, making Satsuki cry again. He growled and glared at the little frog girl. Shut it. Leave her alone. Sai yelled out. She's just a kid, leave her alone. Fayumi yelled out too. You shut it too before I kill all of you. The giant turned to his partner glaring at him. This isn't working. I say we kill one and show them we mean business. The giant yelled, making Sludge roll his eyes. Screw you. I'm offing the brat and her sister. Lifting his hand holding both Sayu and her sister, he grinned wildly. Everyone looked in horror as it looked like the giant was going to squeeze the life out of them. The police and pro-heroes were about to act. But before anyone could do anything a sudden voice was heard. Let them go. The villains and everyone looked up to see someone high in the air. They saw a figure in the sunlight and we're heading straight down towards the giant. What the foo? The big dumb brute didn't finish as the figure reached him and gave him a powerful punch to the face. The giant was sent falling to the ground and lost his grip on his hostages. As Fayumi, Sayu, and her sister were falling they were suddenly lifted back in the air. By an unseen force. The figure had his hands out. Before the girls knew what was going on they floated over to the pro-heroes and cops. Who quickly caught them all when the unseen force let them go. Everyone was silent, the giant looked pissed as he began to get up. All eyes were on the mysterious figure. Finally many started to recognize who it was. I don't believe it. Death Arms whispered out in shock as he put Fayumi safely on the ground on her feet. Dumb kid. Fayumi was shocked just like everyone else. Izuku. There stood Izuku, Aka the Stalker. He wasn't wearing his original outfit but everyone knew it was him. His face shined brightly in the light as he glared at the giant and Sludge. If you want me here I am. Izuku yelled out. No one could believe it. The Stalker was here. The last person anyone expected to save the day. But there he was. Facing down 2 big bad villains. Sludge was still in shock, so was Katsuki as he stopped struggling to look at Izuku. The giant was the first to shake off his shock. You're dead. The giant yelled in anger as he began to charge at Izuku. Wait, you idiot. Sludge called out trying to stop his partner. The cash isn't here. But the giant didn't listen, he saw the Stalker and all he wanted to do was kill him. Izuku seeing the big brute charging at him freaked him out a little. But he kept his cool. Wasn't the first time he faced a big intimidating enemy. Probably won't be the last. Activating Terraform he charged as well. Raising his fist, as he got closer the giant grinned smugly. Izuku knew the big villain was underestimating him. So he would use that against him. As both were about to meet, Izuku did something unexpected. Instead of going for the header body like Death Arms or any other hero would do, Izuku used his right elbow and hit the giant's left shin, catching him off guard. The giant immediately roared in pain as he fell to one knee. For a few seconds Izuku quickly deactivated his Terraform and used his main quirk, trying to find a weak spot to attack. Finally, after a few seconds of analyzing, he found it. With a focused look, Izuku stopped using his main and quirk and activated Iron Make, both his arms turning into metal. Before the giant could get up and try to attack, Izuku ran up to him. Using both of his arms, he delivered a powerful double punch to the villain's right upper abdomen. Many in the crowd thought Izuku was crazy for not going for the head or legs again. They were in shock to see the big man coughed up like he got hit by a truck. The giant's eyes went white and his mind went blank. A few seconds later he dropped to the floor, completely knocked out. Everyone was silent. Completely silent. Again, no one could believe what just happened. 3 hits, that's all it took. The first was to make the giant let go of his hostages. The second was to bring him down to his knees. The final blow to completely knock him out. It was nuts. Even a hero like Death Arms wouldn't be able to do that in a few hits. Liver shot. Izuku mumbled out loud enough for some to hear. A normal liver shot can incapacitate a normal person. The giant wasn't like a normal person. When judging his size with his quirk, Izuku knew he would have to use more force. That's why he used Iron Make and did a double punch. Though from what he saw he probably overdid it. That guy is going to need a hospital. Izuku said out loud, as few heard unknowingly of him. Liver injuries aren't good. Sludge couldn't believe it. The giant was taken out so fast. That guy could give 3 pro heroes a fight if he had to. And he was taken out in 3 shots. And no way. Sludge shrieked as he backed up a little. With Kitsuki still stuck in his muddy body. He also couldn't believe what he just saw either. How did you do that? Izuku didn't say a word as he sent Sludge a glare, making him flinch in fear. I'm only going to say this once, let Kaken go. Izuku demanded as he walked a bit closer to the Sludge villain. Or you'll end up worse than your friend. Now very afraid, Sludge began to realize he was screwed. Seeing as the police and heroes had him surrounded. The Stalker showing up and taking out his partner like it was nothing. While giving him that scary ass glare. It was safe to say he was out of options. Still, not wanting to go down easy, the huge blob of sludge yelled out and charged at Izuku. Ready to forcibly use Kitsuki's quirk. I'm not going down until I kill you, you son of. Just as Sludge was going to finish that sentence. A sudden flash appeared out of nowhere and 2 famous words were yelled out. Detroit, smash. The huge fist punched Sludge so hard that he exploded. Thankfully before that happened a hand pulled Kitsuki out of Sludge's body. Bits of goo and sludge went everywhere. It was highly doubtful Sludge was dead. Though he wasn't going to be up and about for a while. After that powerful attack it sent a huge shock wave. It was so powerful Izuku had to go into his Terraform to not be sent flying. It also put all the flames out. Then something even more crazy happened. It started to rain. As the rain started to gently fall. The one who defeated Sludge gently put Kitsuki on the ground. Poor guy was too tired to do anything. I should have known you did something reckless, young Midoriya. Izuku looked over to see his teacher and hero All Might. Smiling down at him. He looked a bit out of breath. Maybe because his time was almost up or rushing over here non-stop did it. Either way, he was here. The crowd and everyone was silent again. Then like out of a movie. Everyone began to cheer. The bad guys lost and everyone was saved. All Might kept on smiling as he lifted his fist in the air. Making many cheer harder. After that, All Might looked down at Izuku. Who looked very nervous. He knew he was in trouble. He just didn't know how bad. With a sigh and regretful look, Izuku walked up to All Might. Looking up at the man who risked everything to give him a second chance. I know you're mad. But I couldn't just sit by and let this happen. Izuku stated. I'm sorry that I failed you. That I failed all of you. Our hero looked ready to cry. The last thing he wanted to do was to disappoint his mentor and idol. Oh, how he knew so little. Suddenly something very unexpected happened. All Might, still smiling, wrapped one arm around Izuku and brought him into a small hug. Shocking everyone, especially Izuku. You did what I would have done. I might be a bit annoyed that you did this without permission. But you haven't failed me or anyone. You saved those girls and All Might softly said, giving Izuku a caring look. That takes a true hero, Izuku. I'm proud of you. That was it. Izuku began to softly tear up. Not in sadness, but in joy. He came out here expecting to die or get arrested again. Maybe he still might. But now he was in the arms of his hero, who believed in him more than anyone other than his mom. Saying those 3 words is what he needed. Izuku covered his face in the All Might chest trying to hide his tears. All Might shook his head and chuckled. He then looks at the crowd, police, and heroes. Many were confused and still shocked about what was going on. He frowned a little. Many of them were still afraid or hated Izuku. Even after this. The thought of that angered All Might. Suddenly he came up with an idea to deal with that. The big shots weren't going to like this and he might regret it. But he thought to hell with it. With a big smile, All Might raised Izuku's arm in the air, confusing many and Izuku. He then made Izuku face the crowd and cameras that were probably out. Lucky for him the cap hit his face a bit so no one saw his tears. I want to thank all the heroes and police for doing their jobs. But most of all I want to thank my student and successor All Might proclaimed proudly, still smiling. I am proud to call him these things. Let me introduce you all to Izuku Midoriya. If anyone wasn't shocked they were now. Things once again grew quiet. This time it seemed like the whole city no, the whole country was quiet. Many couldn't believe it. The Stalker was the student and successor of All Might. Izuku stood there blinking for a good minute. He then began to realize what was happening. A huge look of shock and horror appeared on his face. What? All Might kept smiling. Though his mind was preoccupied with something. Izuku rushed in and took out that big villain all by himself. If he could do that with just his quirks. He wondered what would happen if he had one for all. I'll talk to him later. Right now to deal with all this. While that was happening Endeavor was on top of a building. No one seemed to notice him and that's what he wanted. He looked for his daughter. When he found her safe and sound he sighed in relief. Even though he was distant and never really interacted with his family. His focus only on getting his youngest stronger. He cared for his family. He was glad Fayumi was safe. The 0.2 hero frowned as he looked down at All Might and Izuku. He shook his head and huffed. You idiot, you just made everything more difficult. If they only knew. Meanwhile in Japan. At a skyscraper, a building that was owned by Yamagata Industries. In a very large office. Most definitely the CEO's office. A large TV was on and someone was watching the news while sitting on their chair behind their huge desk. This person saw and heard everything. From the beginning to the shocking ending. The person sighed. It appears Mrs. Petrelli was wrong. The person said to himself as he got up from his seat. He walked over to a display that held a magnificent katana. I trust Nana's students. The boy isn't like his father. In fact, I believe he is something more. The person walked back to his desk. Pushing a button that called his assistant. A small beep later a female voice rang out. Yes Mr. Nakamura. Cancel any plans or appointments I have this month. Of course Mr. Nakamura. Will that be all? Yes, thank you. Another beep and everything was silent. The man got up and walked over to the large window in his office. The man was old, but not that old. He had gray hair with a bit of black here and there. With a kind and round face. He had glasses that covered his jet black eyes. He was smiling faintly as he looked outside. He knew things were changing. Whether they were good or bad he couldn't tell. He was old, older than most, and he's seen things many wouldn't believe. Being able to time travel will do that to anyone. Maybe I should call Peter. Have his input. Things are pretty calm in America for him to visit. Mr. Nakamura softly said with a smile. Maybe I should visit Toshinori and his students. See if the young man has what it takes. Things were indeed changing. Meanwhile in some slum apartment. In a run-down and sketchy apartment complex. A person was slowly dying in one apartment from multiple stab wounds and blood loss. They were lying on the living room floor with a TV on. Which showed All Might and Izuku. Wow, you spilled so much blood. A feminine and sweet voice called out. It's got me all hot and bothered. The girl suddenly appeared over the dying person. The girl was a relatively petite girl with dirty blonde hair, which she stylized into messy styled buns on both sides of her head. She also sported straight bangs, cut in an uneven cut-like style with 2 stray strands of hair on each side of her face. Her eyes were yellow and somewhat squinted, with vertically slit-like pupils, and she also had some sharp canine teeth. She was holding a very bloody knife. With an all-too-sweet yet sadistic smile she stopped looking at her victim. Because she looked at the TV and her smile got bigger. A blush appeared on her face as she couldn't stop looking at Izuku. I'm so glad you're okay Mr. Stalker. I want to meet you so badly. The girl said with a love-struck smile and glint in her eyes. She brought the knife close to her chest and held it tightly. I'm following your example and taking out the bad guys. When we meet I hope you'll accept me so I can see you finally covered in blood. This girl wasn't the only one happy to see Izuku not in prison somewhere. The fanatic group The Prey were ecstatic their hero was out. Many who believed in the Stalker's type of justice were happy too. Even though Izuku never believed in such justice. What he did was something he was forced to do. To protect his mom and other innocent people from himself. These people didn't know that. All they saw was a person brave enough to go against the established order of things. That's all they cared about. Someone who was an outcast like them. Whether Izuku liked it or not. He changed the world. For better or worse. Many would never stop seeing him as a vigilante. A hero that believed in their own justice. Their own convictions. Somewhere in Japan. Speaking of which, a certain person was watching the TV like everyone else. This person was a man with a battle-hardened face. A very intimidating and muscular man. Who had black hair and that was in a messy fashion. His face was mostly flat for some odd reason. Like he didn't have a nose and his eyes were blood red. The man sported a dark combat suit plated with metal armor across his body that holstered his weapons. Which were mostly knives. His torso was sleeveless and had his arms wrapped in bandages. He also wore long black wristbands and a watch on his left arm. His knees were protected with metal pads and he wore black, steel boots with sharp spikes. He also wore a blood-red scarf and matching headband, as well some tattered cloth he wore around his face like a mask. His steely gaze was on the TV as he cleaned his weapon. Which was a worn and damaged katana. "Looks like you're still around, Stalker," the man whispered. "My quest hasn't even begun yet and things are already changing. You have changed the world. Many see you as a hero while others see a vigilante or villain. What I see is a brave young man challenging the notion of what a hero really is." Smiling wildly, the man stood up and placed his sword away. "You being a student and successor of All Might, for better or worse, a change has happened. Looks like you're still around, Stalker," the man whispered. "My quest hasn't even begun yet and things are already changing. You have changed the world. Many see you as a hero while others see a vigilante or villain. What I see is a brave young man challenging the notion of what a hero really is." Smiling wildly, the man stood up and placed his sword away. "You being a student and successor of All Might shows me that my ideal world may come true. Until then, I will show the world the fakes and glory hounds that are called heroes. I won't stop until my ideal world becomes a reality. Not until you, Stalker or All Might, stop me. Because only a true hero will kill me. I will restore the word hero. For everyone. For better or worse, a change has happened." An hour later. The day was supposed to be a normal day for Izuku. Wake up, eat, train, lessons, train some more, eat again, then go to sleep. That's all. But nope. Today was probably the most troublesome day ever. First he had to deal with the voices. Which were getting worse. Hearing all this bad news left and right. The prey, copycats, and people getting hurt or worse. All because of him. Today only got worse when those villains attacked and took Kaken, Ms. Todoroki, and those girls hostage. At that point Izuku had enough. He couldn't just sit by and let that happen. It was dangerous and irresponsible. That's what the police and some pro-heroes told him. He could have gotten himself and the hostages killed. He understood that. All Might understood that. Unfortunately, a lot of people were having trouble understanding that. "You brat. How dare you knock me out?" Right now Izuku was feeling that. He and All Might had gotten home after dealing with the aftermath of the incident. From nosy reporters to the cops and pro-heroes. Many were still reeling from what All Might said. Even Izuku was still shocked. After dealing with all that, All Might and some cops escorted him back home. Where he was now dealing with Mount Lady. Who was pissed. What kind of son knocks out their own mom? Mount Lady was currently pinching and pulling Izuku's face as hard as she could. The only thing stopping her from going giant and crushing him was his mom and All Might. All Might just stood by with a sweat drop. Izuku moaned as his face was being stretched and pinched left and right. Of course was trying to defuse the situation. "It's alright, Mount Lady." Inko tried to calm down the hot-headed hero. "And no one got hurt and that's fine with me." "It's alright, Mrs. M. I'm doing this for you as well." Mount Lady exclaimed, still not stopping. She then glared down at Izuku with an angry tick. "You better apologize now. Especially to your mom, Dumbus." "I'm sorry." Izuku moaned out in pain. Izuku was suddenly dropped to the floor as he moaned in pain. Mount Lady had finally let go. Though she was still mad. Inko went down to her son's aid and sweat dropped. Mount Lady reminded her too much of her friend Mitsuki. Kitsuki's mom. Now Izuku moaned out once more as he was helped up by his mom and All Might. He turned to his mom with a shameful expression. "I'm really sorry, Mom. I didn't want to knock you and Mount Lady out. But I know you two would have stopped me if I didn't." Inko sighed as she gently placed a comforting hand on her son's cheek. "Oh Izuku, I know you meant well. I'm proud you saved all those people. But promise me you'll tell me before you do something so rash again." Okay. He immediately nodded and smiled sadly. Suddenly Izuku felt his cheek being slightly pinched and looked in shock at his mom, who is smiling very sweetly with a dark and murderous look. But because if you do that again honey, you'll see just how unhappy I'll be. Inko stated very sweetly while giving out a dark aura. Okay sweetie. Izuku did the most intelligent thing he's done in a while. He nodded furiously with a small whimper. All Might was very unsettled and a bit frightened at how Inko looked. Mount Lady was shocked then smirked. Damn Mrs. M, Mount Lady whispered, still smirking. A small cough came from All Might, getting everyone's attention. Me and Izuku have a lot to discuss. In private. You did good Mount Lady given the circumstances. You can go now. Mount Lady simply nodded and began to leave. But not before giving Inko a kind smile and nod. On her way out she glared a little at Izuku, making him squirm a little. She sighed as she patted Izuku on the head, surprising him. Glad you're not dead. Try not to do anything nuts. Also good job, but next time you knock me out, I will squish you. Izuku grew pale at that because he knew she was being serious. With a sweet smile she waved goodbye to everyone and left. Man, she almost acts like Kakin. Izuku muttered out. That's when he even grew paler. What if they are related? Even Inko wondered about that. She knew Mitsuki was brash, just like her son. Maybe she and Mount were the ladies related. Izuku, my boy. It's time we have a talk. All Might said, getting both mother and son's attention. Inko, I'm sorry, but this talk has to be between me and Izuku. I hope that's alright. Inko smiled and nodded. It's alright. Besides, I should make dinner. You two go on. Inko said, still smiling. I'm glad you're both safe. Izuku smiled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. All Might smiled brightly and brought a thumbs up. Of course Inko. Like I said, you have nothing to act. Before All Might could finish, his time had run out. In a puff of smoke he returned to his sickly form, while coughing out blood from his mouth. Ah! Both Inko and Izuku screamed in surprise. Neither of them still couldn't get used to that. A few minutes later Izuku and All Might were outside in the training ground behind the mansion, away from the guards' eyes and ears. Inko was currently making dinner. Since moving in, All Might has grown to love her cooking. He was good at many things, but he was not. What is it that you want to talk about, All Might? Izuku asked as he was facing his mentor. Is this about the hostage incident? All Might sighed as he looked at Izuku with a serious gaze. I'm proud of what you did. It's what I would have done. Still, I'm disappointed. You knew you shouldn't have done what you did. Especially given the position you are in. I'm not saying it wasn't right. Young Bakugo and those girls would have surely died. Unfortunately though, you have put me and the government in a very difficult position. You know that, right? Not a word was said as Izuku looked down at the ground, avoiding his mentor's gaze. You have to understand, my boy. You aren't a hero. Not yet. You can't go out as the Stalker and do as you please. That isn't you anymore. Today people could have died and that's on you. All Might explained as he crossed his arms. And if you died, that'd be on me. What would I say to your mother? Izuku was clenching his fist. He didn't want to hear this, but he needed to. Because All Might was right. He isn't the Stalker anymore. He's not a hero either. Still, I'm proud of you. That caused our hero to look up at All Might, who was smiling proudly. Everyone thought I was crazy for taking such a chance on you. Many still do. They all think you are nothing more than a villain who needs to be put away. Me, your mother, and those who know you best know that isn't true. And hopefully today many will start to see you the way I do. You're going to be a great hero, my boy, greater than anyone else. Before Izuku knew it, tears were falling down his face. He couldn't help it. He was too soft for his own good. He wiped the tears and tried to put on a normal face, but was failing. Young Midoriya. Today you've not only proven what I've known all along. You've shown the entire world that you have the heart of a hero. All Might said, still smiling, as he placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. That's why I know for certain you are the one I've been searching for so long. You are the one who will inherit my power and become my successor. Izuku blinked a couple times before tilting his head in confusion. What? All Might spewed out a bunch of blood in response, making Izuku scream out once again. AHHH. After checking to make sure his mentor was alright, Izuku looked up at him, still wondering what he meant. All Might? What do you mean to inherit your power? Also, you said successor, just like earlier. What are you trying to say? Wiping away any stray blood, All Might looked at Izuku with a nod. Sorry, I guess I should explain before I say anything further. Since the first time we've met, I bet you wonder why I'm in such a sorry state at times. I'm sorry for not fully explaining why. You see, a couple years ago I was in a big fight that almost cost me my life. I managed to walk away from it. Unfortunately, so did the other guy. I also didn't leave without a scratch. With a grim expression, All Might lifted his shirt up to reveal a nasty injury on the side of his abdomen. It caused Izuku to reel back a little. He's seen a few bad injuries in his life, having quite a few of them himself. His burn from that Magma guy left its mark on him more so than anything. Strangely enough, it was on the same side of where All Might's injury was. My respiratory system was basically destroyed. I lost my whole stomach. All the surgeries have worn me out. I've tried everything and it can't be fixed. Right now I can do hero work for at least 3 hours a day. All Might bitterly as he left his shirt down. This fight has been kept under wraps because I didn't want to cause a panic. The world needs a symbol to hold on to have hope. Since debuting, All Might has become so much more than the no.1 hero. He's become a symbol of peace. The one who always smiles when things look grim. Even in other countries many revered him as such. But I'm on borrowed time. I might have a year or two at best before I won't be able to keep my muscle form. That's why I have chosen you to be my successor, to be the one to inherit my quirk. All Might said with a weak smile as he hands in the air. I wasn't born with this quirk, it was given to me like a scared torch from my teacher and those before her. This quirk is called One for All. Izuku's eyes widened in shock. All of this was a lot to process. Even for him. He activated his main quirk and began to analyze him. Looking for any sign of lying. From what he saw, All Might wasn't lying. Not one bit. Soon it began to make sense. He knew All Might's quirk was strange. No matter how hard he tried to analyze it or figure out what it was, he would get nothing. It felt like he was trying to use his quirk on multiple people at once. All my power and abilities come from this quirk. I can transfer this quirk to someone else. And that's just one facet of my secret abilities. One person improves this power, then hands it off to another. It continues to grow. It's this cultivated power that allows me to save those who are in need of a hero. The truth behind my strength. Still reeling from this shocking revelation, Izuku managed to finally speak. Why give me this power? Why make me your successor? Izuku asked softly as he tried to make sense of all this. Is that why you risk so much for me? So I can be your successor? It was a good question. Giving out a small sigh and pondering that question. A few moments later he spoke. Are you kidding? Young Midoriya, since the moment I saw you, I knew that in time you're going to be the best out of all us. You risked everything to save those people from that falling building. Went beyond your limits. Something I've had to do many times. At UA. They have a saying. Plus ultra. To go beyond. I believe you know these words well, Izuku, even without knowing it yourself. That's why I know you are worthy out of anyone to inherit my power and become the next symbol of peace. Still in disbelief, Izuku looked up at All Might. Hearing all this was too much. Yet he still listened. You may think you are unworthy because of what you've done. But you're not. What you did today only further proves it. I know you have so much on your shoulders. Trust me, I know the feeling. But Izuku, whether you accept my power and try to become the next symbol of peace or not, I will still help you achieve your dream. You will become a hero. I promise you that. It was hard not to believe him. Even in this form, All Might still had so much strength and fire in his eyes. A lot of things were going through Izuku's mind. Should he or shouldn't? If he was the same quirkless fanboy months ago, he would say yes without hesitation. But he wasn't that same person. He wasn't quirkless, a fanboy maybe, but he's changed. Having that kind of power along with the power he already has. It sounded dangerous. Not just for him, but for all those around him. Who's going to stop if he gives into his hunger again? To be given such power. To him of all people. It didn't seem right. Still, Izuku couldn't help but be swayed by All Might's words. His hero was on borrowed time. The man who risked everything for him needed him. How could he say no? I accept. Meanwhile, somewhere in a dark hideout, a familiar figure was hearing the news. After today's unexpected event, there wasn't a person alive who didn't show interest in the Stalker. I must say I wasn't expecting this to happen. All Might, you are a desperate fool. To pick Siller's child as your successor. It may have been to try and quell the public from making an outcry, but I truly know what you truly mean. The scarred man was sitting on his chair, still hooked up to multiple machines. He was smiling while shaking his head a little. It's kind of ironic if I do say so myself. Given who we've chosen as our successors. You choose a boy from such a tainted and bloody family line. Many of whom would be considered worse than villains. Me choosing a boy from such a noble and heroic bloodline. Your teacher's grandson nonetheless. My, what a turn of events. The smile the man had wasn't normal or cheerful. Not like All Might's. No, this smile was sinister and full of malice. The opposite of a hero's. My interest in the boy is only growing. The ruckus he is causing is quite entertaining. This group that worships like a god is very interesting. Also the amount of individuals that are following his lead. Taking the law into their own hands and using their quirks as they wish. It reminds me so much when quirks first appeared. Who knows, maybe I should have my student recruit the young man. The man stated in amusement of the idea. Suddenly a low whooshing sound was heard coming from behind the man. Ah, Kurogiri and my student. How are you, Tamura? Tamura Shigaraki, a disturbed young man who was the mysterious man's student and successor. He was in his villain garb and looked annoyed as he saw what was on the TV. I'm so sick of this kid. I don't know why everyone is making such a big deal out of him. I thought he was annoying as some stupid low-tier vigilante. But I can't stand the sight of him now. Tamura growled out. Student and successor of All Might, it really pisses me off. The man's smile deepened as he heard the rage in his student's voice. His hatred for heroes, and particularly All Might, was rivaled to his own. I wish I could get my hands on either one of them. And watch them wither to nothing. That little statement caught the man's attention. In fact, it gave him an idea. He's been working on something with his good doctor. They're artificial humans. Tamura. I think you've given me a wonderful idea. The man said to surprise Tamura and Kurogiri. Kurogiri, please contact the doctor. It's time for me and him to finish our little project. Kurogiri simply nodded and disappeared in the shadows with a small whoosh. Leaving a confused Tamura. Teacher, what do you have planned? Tamura asked as he slowly began to smile deviously. Are we going to kill that brat? Or how about All Might? The man chuckled darkly. All in due time, my student. Trust me, you'll get your chance to kill All Might. The boy, however, you will not touch. Not until I dig up more information on him. Do you understand? It was safe to say Tamura was livid. He clenched his hands into fists. Wanting to voice his displeasure, he was about to speak but stopped himself. Not wanting to disappoint his teacher, Tamura sighed. Yes, teacher. Good. Now come here, Tamura. I believe it's time I tell you what I've been working on. The man softly called out as he beckoned Tamura to come to him. Something I'm sure you love. Tamura did as his teacher asked and stood right next to him. He hated seeing the man who saved him and raised him like this. Scared beyond belief. It was All Might's fault. Tamura, let me tell you about artificial humans. Rather, you could call them Nomus if you like. Meanwhile, with Kitsuki. Damn it. Boom. A loud explosion was heard in the middle of a junkyard. Soon more explosions were heard along with yelling and very loud profanities. You shitty fucking nerd. It's only been a few hours since the incident. And Kitsuki was still pissed. Not just because he caused most of the damage. But because he was held hostage by that mud thing. It was that he needed to be saved. Him, of all people. And what was worst of all us, that he had to be saved by that bastard. Deku. Kitsuki blew a broken washing away with his quirk. It soon hit the ground with a loud thud. Kitsuki began to slowly calm down. He was still pissed, of course. He had to stop because his muscles were tensing up. All because of his quirk. That fucking nerd. Why was he there? What the fuck is going on between him and All Might? Kitsuki growled out with a nasty scowl. Why isn't he in some jail or some shit? After getting saved and waking up, Kitsuki was supposed to be taken to the hospital, but he refused. He even threatened a few people to get his point across. What was the worst part was seeing him. Deku. That worthless shit threw a glance here and there at him. Though he wouldn't approach him. As time passed, he and All Might jumped off to somewhere. Leaving many with questions. When that was over, a few heroes and police praised him for being brave or about how powerful his quirk was. He told them to fuck off. Simple as that, and went home. Where he got an earful from his mom and concern from his old man. Not wanting to deal with that all day. He left to go by train. That's all he had going for him. No friends. Not being top dog. Not liking how people praised him. All he had was his training. However, that was a lie. What else he had was this burning desire to beat Deku. That lying vigilante bastard. It didn't matter to him who he beat. How many shitty quirks he had. Or who was his fucking teacher. He was going to get accepted in the UA and become the #1 hero. It didn't matter who would get in his way. He'll crush them. And if Deku gets in his way again, their next fight won't end like last time. No matter how far Deku is ahead of him in terms of power. He was going to get stronger. 10 months, that's the time he had until UA starts. At that time he was going to train harder than he ever has. Next time we meet Deku, you're dead. A few hours later with All Might. It's been a good few hours since he and Izuku had their talk. It still weighed heavy on his mind. He was thankful and worried that he agreed to accept One for All. It's not that the poor boy couldn't handle it. After what he's been through and the amount of quirks, he had made him a perfect candidate. No, what was bothering him is that being the user of One for All had a lot of weight to it. being his successor only made it worse. Also telling the whole world that probably wasn't a good idea. Especially if that man was listening. All Might knew he was going to get flack from the government and his colleagues. Still he would do it all over again. If it helps people see Izuku as a brave and noble young man he sees him as, then it was worth it. The symbol of peace was in his room sitting near his desk doing some paperwork. One thing many failed to mention when becoming a pro hero. His mood was still bright though. His talk with Izuku helped out a lot. Especially that dinner Inko cooked up. Boy was it delicious. It was nice to see everyone enjoying the food with some company. He's gotten very used to Inko and Izuku living here. He couldn't imagine what it was like before them. Living alone and leading such a secretive life wasn't all fun. It made him smile seeing Inko and Izuku's smiling faces when they were around. Suddenly All Might's thoughts were interrupted when his phone started to ring. It was pretty late. Izuku and his mother were already off to bed. Izuku was sleeping in one of the other rooms until his broken window could be fixed. Yeah, I'm still gonna have to deal with that later. Who could be calling him at this hour? Hello? All Might greeted as he answered his phone. Izuku Midoriya, the Stalker, you sure have a strange way of picking a successor. Toshinori. Just like that All Might stood up and had a very fearful expression. A bit of blood dropped from his mouth. Sir. All Might exclaimed in shock and a bit of fear. Why are you calling at this hour? What? Can't a teacher call his former student just to talk? I thought I taught you some manners during your training. Immediately All Might began to panic and started to bow up and down very fast. Oh, of course, Gran Torino. Forgive my impudence. A sigh was heard from the other side of the phone. Why I'm calling is that your student has gotten a lot of people talking. Two in particular. I trust that you remember Hiro Nakamura and his friend Peter Petrelli. I believe you once worked under him for a while when you were in America, right? Those two names definitely rang a bell. How could he forget them? The two of them were practically his idols when he was younger. Nakamura and his friend Ando Masahashi were like the godfathers of pro heroes. If it wasn't for them, Japan would still be in the dark ages when Quirks first appeared. Hiro Nakamura, the master of time and space. The time hero. Ando Masahashi, the Crimson Arc. The supercharged hero. Both were the greatest of heroes in the past. Their friendship and bond was said to be unbreakable. Unfortunately, that changed one day. After a terrible incident involving Ando's wife, who was also Hiro's sister, happened. Both haven't seen or talked to one another in years. Last he heard, Ando was still an active hero but was more of a trainer and advisor to the police and younger heroes. From what he heard, a long-time endeavor was his most prized student. Peter Petrelli, now that's a name All Might remembers well. When he visited America to train, he and Mr. Petrelli met when a villain went on a rampage. Petrelli was the No.1 hero in America for a while before he retired. Last he heard, Peter was still an active hero. Hiro was the CEO of Yamagata Industries. A company that now funded pro heroes starting up their careers. While also funding suitable equipment and costumes for heroes too. They were also pretty picky about their clients. And who they sponsored. Only choosing those who were out there just to save lives and do normal heroics. While denying anyone with questionable history or motives. That really didn't win them a lot of people. But it was effective and something All Might himself approved of. Of course. I remember them. Peter especially. I would hope so. Both of them and Ando were good friends with your predecessor and teacher. Nana Shimura had a runaway with people. She was especially close to old Hiro. It's been a good while since I last saw him or anyone from the old days. Apparently Hiro got word about your successor and wants to meet him. Peter too, for some reason. Now that really caught All Might's attention. Really? I mean, sure, but why? Before I get to that. Tell me, have you given the boy one for all yet? No. Not yet. I thought it'd be best to hold off on it until I evaluate him some more. I just want to make sure he doesn't get cold feet. I also want to make sure his body can handle the power of one for all, along with the amount of quirks he has now. I would rather be safe than sorry. That's smart. Given the boy's peculiar quirk and heritage. I'm not saying you've chosen a terrible successor. But what happens if the boy becomes like his father? The Siller I've heard stories about was disturbed and a cold-blooded killer who took quirks in the worst way possible. Worse than All for One. He's not like that. Silence soon filled the room. It wasn't like All Might to raise his voice to anyone. Especially his former teacher Gran Torino. Izuku is many things. But he's not his father. Sure, he's done a lot of things he isn't proud of. But I promise you, sir, he'll become greater than anyone. Greater than me. He has a good heart and a gentle soul. But when needed, that soul of his will burn hotter than anything. You saw what he did to that villain today. He has a long way to go and he'll stumble. But he will be a hero. On the other end of the phone. Gran Torino was shocked. shook to his very core. The conviction and assurance in All Might's voice made him remember something. The time his friend Nana Shimura spoke to him about All Might when he was just some scrawny runt with a big dream. Soon the old hero smirked and laughed a little. It's funny. When Nana told me she was considering you to be her successor, I was doubtful. Yet your teacher stood her ground and told me you were going to change the world. She was right, and something tells me you might be right. That's why I'm asking you to let me get a look at the boy. Excuse me? You big dolt. I'm asking if you let me show the kid a thing or two. All Might cringed a little as he pulled the phone away from ear a little. His old teacher could surely yell when needed. Hey, are you serious? All Might asked in surprise and a bit of fear. I'm asking, ain't I? And it's not just me. Looks like old hero wants to meet the kid. Peter too, when he can find the time. Look, I'm not saying I'll oversee his training. Not right now. Maybe when he's a bit more experienced I'll come knocking. I just want to see what kind of successor you've picked. Hero on the other hand is a different story. I think he's taken a shine to your boy. He'll stick around for a bit and see your progress with the boy. Maybe even teach him a thing or two. Shock wasn't enough to describe what All Might was feeling. He couldn't believe his old teacher and great heroes like Hero and Peter wanted to meet his student. Sure, Izuku was getting people talking and shaking up the world. He just couldn't believe something like this would happen. All Might was hesitant to say yes. But also fearful to say no. He's faced many powerful enemies and only a few people could frighten him. Gran Torino being top on the list. Eventually All Might grew enough courage to answer. Sure. Of course, Gran Torino. It'd be an honor. I'm sure young Izuku will be ecstatic. When do you think you'll get a chance to come? Maybe around tomorrow. Hero cancelled all his appointments and other business crap. He wants to meet the boy soon. That gonna be alright with you, Toshinori? Yes. I mean, of course, teacher. I'll make the preparations and keep it a surprise for Izuku. Good. Well, I've taken enough of your time. Better get some sleep. I'll tell Hero. Hopefully that will get him off my back. Good night, Toshinori. When All Might heard Gran Torino hang up, he immediately sighed in relief and flopped down onto his chair. Slowly starting to rub his temples, All Might began to wonder if he did the right thing. Either way, he felt pity and a bit of fear for Izuku. I need a vacation. All Might grumbled out with a sigh. After that, All Might went back to finishing the reports. Finally finishing them, he went off to bed, dreading what tomorrow will bring. The next day. It was a beautiful morning. After yesterday's event, security has beefed up a bit. There were also some people from a housing repair company who were in Izuku's room replacing the broken window. Speaking of which, Izuku was out back in his workout clothes. He gave out a yawn as his stomach rumbled. Izuku wanted to eat the breakfast his mom made. It looked so delicious. But All Might stopped because he had some special training planned. His mom argued with All Might for a bit. Yet All Might eventually won by promising he'll get to eat later. Hope whatever All Might has planned isn't too rough. Izuku muttered to himself. I wonder if he is going to give me one for all. A few minutes later, Izuku finally saw his mentor. And he wasn't alone. He was shocked to see two old men walking along with All Might, who was in his muscular form. One of the old men was short while the other wasn't. From what he could tell, the short one was a hero. At least that's what he thought because of the outfit. The other man was a mystery. He looked very familiar. He wore some casual clothes anyone would wear, and he carried a samurai sword strapped behind his back. As they got closer, Izuku knew All Might was nervous, even though he was trying his best to smile. When All Might and the two old men finally reached him, he started to get nervous as well. That changed when he finally recognized who the tall old man was. Why, you're Hiro Nakamura. Izuku exclaimed loudly in shock as he pointed his finger at Hiro, catching everyone off guard including Hiro. Why, you're the master of space and time. The time hero. A former No. 1 pro hero. All Might groaned and sweat dropped as he saw Izuku go into full fanboy mode. He's seen this a few times, but not like this. Both Hero and Gran Torino were still taken by Izuku's outburst. Soon Gran Torino started to laugh while Hero chuckled a little. Hahaha. Toshinori, he acts worse than you were at that age. Gran Torino laughed out as he shook his head. Ah, these kids today. Hero stopped chuckling but smiled as he walked over to Izuku, who was still pretty nervous. Izuku Midoriya, it's nice to finally meet you. Hiro said in a kind tone as he extended his hand to Izuku, who nervously accepted it and shook it. Well, you may know who I am already. I'm old-fashioned and would like to formally introduce myself. I'm Hiro Nakamura, master of space and time. Izuku could barely contain his excitement as Hiro bowed a little. It wasn't every day you get to meet a legend. Alright, enough of that. Gran Torino grumbled out as he walked over to Izuku as well. Well, you might know Pikachu here, you don't know me. Name's Gran Torino. Don't call me Pikachu please. Hiro groaned out with annoyance. Oh, don't like that, eh? How about Spock? No. Sulu then? No. Superman? Sorihiko please. Superhero? Please, just stop. Hiro begged as he hid his face in embarrassment, causing Gran Torino to laugh some more. While both Izuku and All Might looked on in confusion. Eventually Izuku got enough nerve to say something finally. What exactly is going on? The two old men stopped and looked at All Might, who decided it was best to come clean. Young Midoriya, it's time I start explaining a few things. You see, Gran Torino here used to be my teacher back when I was younger. Around your age in fact. He knows everything about One for All. Mr. Nakamura also knows too. Both of them knew my predecessor and master. And they're here to train you. What? The end. Thanks for watching my video and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.